morning sun climbed higher over the Philippine Sea. June 19th, 1944. Time showed 08:47 hours. Altitude read 15,000 feet on the instruments. Below the cloud layer, something extraordinary was taking shape. Grumman F6F Hellcat fighters had formed up in perfect formation. These weren't ordinary naval fighters. Special modifications gleamed under their wings. Combat systems that would change everything hung beneath their fuselages. American pilots had their own nickname for these birds. They called them the aluminum tanks. The name fit perfectly. These machines were built like flying fortresses. Heavy, armored, deadly. But the Japanese would soon create a different name entirely. A name whispered in fear across Pacific airfields. Shino Tsubasa, they would call them. Wings of death. The translation carried weight that numbers couldn't capture. These carrier-based fighters represented something revolutionary. Innovation in every rivet and wire. Devastating firepower mounted in their wings. Combat systems designed for one purpose: total air superiority. The myth of zero invincibility was about to die. Death would come in a single afternoon of combat. Naval historians would remember this day forever. They would call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. What followed went beyond tactical victory. This became complete psychological collapse. Japanese naval aviation dominance crumbled in hours. The same dominance that had ruled Pacific skies since Pearl Harbor. 3 years of Japanese air superiority. Gone in one day. The transformation had started months earlier. Japanese defensive planning began after their victory at the Philippine Sea. That was June 1943, a full year of preparation. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanded the first mobile fleet. His flagship cut through Pacific waters with confidence. Ozawa had studied every engagement since Midway, every American carrier battle, every tactical report. His staff analyzed combat data for months. They reached conclusions that seemed unshakable. Logic backed by 3 years of warfare. The Mitsubishi A6M0 remained supreme in maneuverability. Japanese pilot skill would continue dominating any engagement. These weren't opinions. These were facts proven in combat. Blood and victories had written these truths. Aboard the carrier Taiho, Ozawa's command center buzzed with activity. Maps covered plotting tables. Radio operators monitored frequencies. Staff officers prepared tactical directives. On May 15, 1944, Ozawa drafted his most important order, Tactical Directive Number 7. The words carried absolute confidence. Our Zero squadrons shall engage enemy fighters at close range. Superior maneuverability ensures victory. American fighters are heavy and slow. We shall use this against them. Victory belongs to the agile. The mathematics seemed unchangeable. Combat statistics supported every assumption. At the Battle of Coral Sea, Zero fighters achieved 3-to-1 kill ratios. Blood in the water. Bodies floating. American aircraft burning. The Eastern Solomons had proven Japanese superiority again. Zero pilots demonstrated devastating dogfighting capability. They had faced the earlier F4F Wildcats. The Americans had fought bravely. They had also died in large numbers. The Zero's legendary turn radius measured just 16 meters at combat speed. Physics made it nearly impossible to outmaneuver. Traditional dogfighting favored the lighter aircraft. Always. Without exception. The laws of aerial combat seemed written in stone. But across the Pacific, Americans had been studying too. Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland housed special teams. Combat analysis units worked around the clock. They examined every engagement report, every piece of gun camera footage, every pilot debriefing since 1942. Mountains of data painted a clear picture. American pilots were dying. American tactics weren't working. Something had to change completely. The analysis teams reached a revolutionary conclusion. A conclusion that would reshape fighter design forever. You don't beat the Zero by trying to outturn it. You beat it by refusing to fight on its terms entirely. The weapon that would break Japanese air superiority had desperate origins. The Guadalcanal campaign 18 months earlier had nearly ended in disaster. August 7, 1942 brought the first real test. Marine and Navy pilots flew F6F Wildcats into combat. They encountered Zero squadrons that could literally fly circles around them. American pilots watched their friends die. They watched Zeros maneuver like deadly dancers. Every turning engagement ended badly. Every dogfight became a funeral. Something had to change, or the Pacific would be lost. The solution emerged through collaboration. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation partnered with the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics. Engineers and combat veterans worked together. They studied every failure. They analyzed every death. They designed a completely different approach. The result carried an official designation, F6F3 Hellcat. The name suggested power and aggression, but the specifications told the real story. This aircraft was designed specifically for Pacific carrier operations. More importantly, it was engineered specifically to counter Zero advantages. Technical specifications documented in Bureau of Aeronautics records revealed revolutionary thinking. The Hellcat featured a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine. This power plant produced 2,000 horsepower. The Zero's Nakajima Sakai engine generated only 1,130 horsepower. Nearly double the power. Physics would work for Americans now. Weight told another story entirely. The aircraft weighed 15,113 pounds fully loaded. The Zero tipped scales at only 6,164 pounds. The difference was staggering. Where the Zero prioritized agility through lightness, the Hellcat chose power and protection. Two completely different philosophies. Armor protection revealed the American approach. Pilot armor plating weighed 212 pounds alone. Self-sealing fuel tanks held 250 gallons safely. Bulletproof windscreen used 3-inch laminated glass. Every component prioritized pilot survival. The Zero carried no pilot armor whatsoever. No self-sealing tanks protected fuel supplies. These design choices had once seemed justified. Superior maneuverability compensated for vulnerability. Now, these became fatal weaknesses. Firepower specifications showed American philosophy clearly. 6 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns. Each gun carried 400 rounds. Total ammunition load reached 2,400 rounds. Armor-piercing and incendiary rounds filled the belts. The Zero carried 2 7.7mm machine guns and 2 20mm cannons. Limited ammunition supplies restricted engagement time. In sustained combat, the Hellcat could pour 10 times more metal into the air. Volume of fire would overwhelm Japanese aircraft. Flight trials at Naval Air Station Anacostia in March 1943 shocked everyone. Test pilots couldn't believe the performance numbers. Maximum speed reached 380 miles per hour at 23,400 feet, 60 miles per hour faster than the Zero. Rate of climb measured 3,500 feet per minute. Combat ceiling extended to 37,300 feet. The Hellcat could climb faster than anything Japanese. It could fly higher than any enemy fighter. Most importantly, it could dive away from any engagement at will. The days of trapped American pilots were ending. Speed and power meant nothing without proper tactics. The breakthrough came from studying earlier innovations. Commander John "Jimmy" Thatch had developed the Thatch Weave defensive maneuver. His tactics had saved American lives in desperate situations. Now, Navy tacticians developed offensive doctrine using Hellcat capabilities. The rules were simple, but revolutionary. Never dogfight the Zero under any circumstances. Use superior speed and power for boom and zoom attacks. Maintain altitude advantage at all costs. Emphasize teamwork over individual heroics. Exploit Zero lack of armor with concentrated firepower. Training squadrons at Naval Air Station Pensacola in Hawaii drilled these tactics relentlessly. Pilots learned to resist every natural instinct. The temptation to turn with Zeros had killed too many Americans. Now they practiced high-speed diving attacks. Fire concentrated bursts. Climb away before Japanese pilots could react. They trained in pairs and divisions. Mutual support became religion. Overlapping fields of fire turned individual dogfights into coordinated executions. No more lone wolf tactics. No more individual heroics. Team warfare would dominate the skies. Psychological preparation proved equally important. Fighter direction officer training taught pilots to trust their aircraft's advantages completely. Instructors hammered home simple truths. Your Hellcat is tougher, faster, and better armed. Don't fight their fight. Make them fight yours instead. By June 1944, 15 carrier air groups had transitioned to Hellcats. Over 2,500 pilots had completed the new tactical training. These weren't just new aircraft. This represented a complete reimagining of naval fighter combat. The stage was set for the largest carrier battle in history. Vice Admiral Ozawa's first mobile fleet deployed 430 aircraft. Predominantly A6M Zeros, operated on tactics forged in earlier victories. They expected to face improved American fighters. They anticipated familiar combat patterns. Traditional dogfights, where Japanese skill and Zero agility would prevail. They understood this type of warfare. They had mastered these tactics. Victory seemed certain based on past experience. They had no concept of what was approaching. The F6F Hellcat wasn't just a better fighter. It represented a completely different approach to aerial warfare. Every system was designed specifically to negate Zero advantages. The Japanese were preparing for the battle they knew how to fight. The Americans were bringing a battle the Japanese had never imagined possible. June 19, 1944, dawned clear and hot. Operation Forager was beginning. Time read 08:23 hours on ship chronometers. The first combat deployment of massed Hellcat squadrons occurred 200 miles west of Guam. Japanese scout planes had located Task Force 58 earlier. Vice Admiral Ozawa had received the contact reports. He launched his first strike wave immediately. 69 aircraft climbed toward the American fleet. Predominantly, Zeros filled the formation. Orders were simple. Destroy American carriers using proven tactics. The same tactics that had worked since 1941. Air Group 15's action reports documented what followed with clinical precision. Radar operators aboard USS Lexington detected the incoming raid at 0959 hours. Range showed 150 miles and closing. Fighter direction officers began vectoring Hellcat combat air patrols toward the threat. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell commanded Fighting Squadron 15. He received the intercept course at 1007 hours. His division of 4 Hellcats turned west immediately. They climbed steadily to 25,000 feet. 5,000 feet above the approaching Japanese formation. Altitude meant everything in the new tactics. Height provided energy for diving attacks. Energy translated to speed. Speed meant life in combat. The physics were simple and deadly. Official after-action reports described what happened next. Clinical language masked the violence. Hellcat divisions executed vertical attacks, from superior altitude. Enemy fighters attempted to engage in turning combat. Our pilots maintained energy advantage. They refused horizontal maneuvering completely. Results spoke clearly. 42 enemy aircraft destroyed. 3 Hellcats damaged. 0 Hellcats lost. The numbers told only part of the story. Japanese pilots encountered Hellcats in force for the first time. They attempted their standard tactics immediately. Tight turns to get on American tails, using 0 superior turn radius to gain firing positions. These tactics had worked for 3 years. They had always worked before, but the Hellcats weren't there to turn. McCampbell's after-action report captured the revolution. We dove through their formation at 450 miles per hour, fired concentrated bursts, then climbed back to altitude using our superior power. The Zeros couldn't follow our climb rate. Those that tried to pursue stalled out completely. They became easy targets for our covering division. The tactical revolution was complete. Every assumption Japanese pilots held about fighter combat had become a liability. Their lightweight meant American .50 caliber rounds tore through their aircraft. Their lack of armor meant pilot casualties from hits that Hellcat pilots would survive. Their limited ammunition meant they couldn't afford extended engagements. Meanwhile, Hellcats could make multiple attack runs. The physics of destruction became apparent in gun camera footage. Post-battle analysis revealed devastating effectiveness. The Hellcat's 650 caliber guns converged at 300 yards. This created a cone of destruction that could saw a Zero in half. Armor-piercing and incendiary rounds would penetrate Zero fuel tanks. Without self-sealing technology, a single tracer hit often meant catastrophic fire. Zeros burned like torches when hit. Hellcats absorbed punishment and kept flying. Combat operations drove immediate tactical refinements. Squadron intelligence officers documented lessons learned. Boom and zoom tactics proved devastatingly effective, but pilots discovered additional advantages. The Hellcat's superior roll rate at high speed allowed rapid position changes. Zeros couldn't match these maneuvers. Rugged construction meant Hellcats could absorb battle damage. They returned to carriers shot full of holes. One VF-16 Hellcat landed with 72 bullet and cannon holes. The pilot walked away uninjured. Zero pilots rarely survived similar damage. At 11:07 hours, Ozawa launched his second strike. 130 aircraft formed the largest single formation. This wave included his most experienced pilots. Veterans of Pearl Harbor flew in these ranks, men who had raided the Indian Ocean, the cream of Japanese naval aviation. They expected to overwhelm American defenses through sheer numbers. Weight of attack would succeed where individual skill had failed. Instead, they flew into a carefully orchestrated aerial ambush. Task Force 58's fighter direction had evolved into precise science. Radar tracking identified formations 100 miles out. Fighter direction officers stacked Hellcat divisions at different altitudes. High cover at 27,000 feet. Middle intercept at 20,000 feet. Low patrol at 15,000 feet. The Japanese formation, climbing to attack altitude, flew into a three-dimensional killing zone. Every approach was covered. Every altitude was guarded. There was no escape route available. Lieutenant Alexander Vratiou flew from USS Lexington. He described the engagement in his combat report. Language was professional, but excitement showed through. Tally-ho at 11:32 hours. 50-plus bandits, Angels 18. Executed overhead attack with division. Selected zero lagging formation. Diving attack 500 miles per hour indicated. Observed strikes on wings and fuselage. Aircraft exploded immediately. Pulled up for altitude. Second attack on different target. repeated 6 times total. Splashed 6 confirmed in 8 minutes. Never turned once. Just boom and zoom. Boom and zoom. Boom and zoom. Vratsiu's 6 victories in one engagement became legendary, but he was one of dozens performing similar executions. VF2, VF8, VF16, VF24. Every Hellcat squadron was racking up unprecedented scores. The Japanese formation disintegrated, not through overwhelming force, through systematic destruction. American pilots were hunting, not fighting. They were executing, not engaging. The difference was stark and deadly. Radio intercepts decoded by Fleet Radio Unit Pacific documented Japanese command communications. The messages revealed complete tactical bewilderment. 11:47 hours. Enemy fighters refuse close combat. Request tactics guidance. 1203 hours. American fighters climbing away from our pursuit. Unable to engage. 1215 hours. Heavy losses. Enemy using unknown tactics. Need immediate support. 1228 hours. Formation breaking. Cannot maintain cohesion under vertical attacks. The third Japanese strike wave launched at 1300 hours. 47 aircraft represented reduced strength. By this time, Ozawa's staff had begun to comprehend reality. They were facing something fundamentally different, something their training hadn't prepared them for. Flight leaders received modified instructions. Avoid vertical combat. Maintain tight formations. Target bombers, not fighters. These adaptations came too late. They also proved futile. Hellcat squadrons had refined their tactics with each engagement. They now operated in coordinated divisions of 4. Mutual support protocols made them nearly impossible to isolate. If Zeros tried to ignore the fighters and attack bombers, Hellcats simply destroyed them from behind. The Zeros' lack of rear armor made tail attacks suicidal to ignore. By 1400 hours, the tactical situation had evolved from battle to massacre. Ozawa's 4th strike wave represented his final offensive capability. 82 aircraft carried fuel for barely 2 hours of flight. Enough to reach the target. Fight briefly. Return if possible. What they didn't know was crucial intelligence had been compromised. Their carrier coordinates had been transmitted in clear. Communication breakdowns exposed fleet positions. American submarines were already moving into attack positions. The engagement that followed demonstrated how completely the Hellcat had revolutionized carrier warfare. Fighting Squadron 27 was led by Lieutenant Commander Ernest Wood. He intercepted the formation at 1423 hours. Wood's tactical innovation became doctrine within hours. He called it the mowing machine pattern. His 12 Hellcats formed a horizontal line at 24,000 feet. Then they dove simultaneously through the Japanese formation, a coordinated sweep. The concentrated firepower from 72 machine guns created an impossible wall of lead. Wood's combat report captured the execution with stark clarity. Formation dove line abreast at 1425 hours. Each pilot assigned sector of enemy formation. Firing commenced at 800 yards, ceased at 300 yards. Observed 16 enemy aircraft destroyed or critically damaged in single pass. Reformed at altitude, repeated attack pattern. Enemy formation completely disrupted. No effective return fire experienced. The Japanese perspective was documented through post-war interrogations. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey revealed pilots completely unprepared for this form of warfare. Lieutenant Hideaki Nakajima was one of the few survivors from the 4th wave. His testimony was haunting. We trained for individual combat. One pilot against one pilot. Skill against skill. The Americans fought as machines in perfect coordination. When they attacked, the sky filled with tracers from every direction. There was no dodging, no maneuvering, just fire everywhere. Our tactics meant nothing. The psychological impact exceeded physical destruction. For the first time in the Pacific War, Japanese naval aviators broke formation. They fled before reaching their targets. Radio intercepts documented commanders ordering retreats. Actions previously unthinkable in Japanese naval aviation doctrine. The Bushido Code that sustained pilots through Midway and Coral Sea shattered. It broke against a form of combat that rendered individual courage irrelevant. Honor meant nothing against coordinated machine gun fire. June 19, 1944, 15:07 hours. The day's Butcher's Bill revealed the extent of transformation. Official U.S. Navy tabulations painted a stark picture. Japanese aircraft launched 373. Japanese aircraft returning to carriers 130. American aircraft lost to Japanese fighters 23. Japanese pilots killed or missing 243. But numbers alone didn't capture the qualitative shift. Japan had lost irreplaceable veteran pilots. Men with thousands of hours of combat experience. Instructors who trained new aviators. Squadron leaders who held units together. The institutional knowledge of Japanese naval aviation was destroyed. The Hellcat hadn't just won a battle. It had eliminated the expertise that made Japanese aviation effective. Experience couldn't be replaced quickly. Training new pilots took years. The Pacific War wouldn't last that long. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commanded Task Force 58. His action report documented the strategic implications clearly. Enemy air capability effectively neutralized. Fighter opposition negligible going forward. The F6F Hellcat has proven decisively superior to all Japanese fighter types. Recommend maximum Hellcat production and deployment. The evening of June 19th saw American submarines exploit the chaos. USS Albacore torpedoed the carrier Taiho. Ozawa's flagship took fatal damage. USS Kavala sank the carrier Shokaku. The combination of aerial defeat and submarine attack destroyed Japan's first mobile fleet as an offensive force. 2 fleet carriers gone. Aircraft strength reduced by 2/3. Pilot casualties catastrophic. Japanese naval aviation would never recover from this single day. The Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Every subsequent battle saw Hellcats dominating skies with increasing ease. The kill ratio that emerged from June 19th held steady throughout the war. For every Hellcat lost to Japanese fighters, 19 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. Mathematics of aerial warfare had fundamentally changed. Combat operations drove continuous improvements to Hellcats. Field modifications included upgraded engines, improved gunsight systems, enhanced radio equipment. The F6F variant, introduced in early 1945, featured a 2,200 horsepower engine. Provisions for rockets and bombs transformed the fighter into a multi-role platform. Marine Corps squadrons adopted Hellcats for land-based operations. VMF 213, VMF 214, VMF 221. The famous Black Sheep, Swashbucklers, and Fighting Falcons all transitioned to Hellcats. They continued the slaughter from land bases, from Henderson Field, from Peleliu, from captured Japanese airfields. Hellcats hunted Zeros wherever they appeared. The tactics evolved, but the fundamental principle remained unchanged. Refuse the turning fight. Use superior power and protection. Coordinate attacks. Exploit Japanese vulnerabilities. Every engagement validated the design philosophy. Every battle proved the age of lightweight maneuverable fighters had ended. Modern aerial combat belonged to aircraft that could absorb punishment and dish out devastating firepower. By war's end, operational statistics told the complete story. Total Hellcat production, 12,275 aircraft. Total aerial victories credited to Hellcats, 5,223. Total Hellcats lost to enemy aircraft, 270. The math was simple and brutal. 19.3 to 1 kill ratio. No other fighter in any air force in any theater approached this record. The Hellcat hadn't just defeated the Zero, it had made the Zero's entire design philosophy obsolete. The psychological toll on Japanese aviators became increasingly evident through documentation gathered by Navy psychiatrists working with carrier battle groups. These medical professionals observed disturbing patterns emerging from prisoner interrogations. The captured pilots revealed a devastating truth. Many had completely abandoned hope of surviving encounters with the American fighters. One uncaptured pilot managed to provide testimony that offered deep insight into the mental state plaguing Japanese aviation. Lieutenant Suborno Kitahata spoke words that would haunt military analysts for decades to come. The moment we climbed into our cockpits, we understood our fate was sealed. Death waited in the sky above. The Americans possessed aircraft superior in every measurable way. Their machines climbed with terrifying speed. They dove like falling stones. Bullets bounced off their armored hulls, while our thin metal crumpled under their guns. Their firepower overwhelmed everything we threw at them. We retained only one advantage. Our aircraft could turn tighter circles. But the Americans refused to engage us where we held strength. They attacked from above and disappeared before we could respond. Fighting them felt like bringing swords to a rifle battle. The outcome was predetermined before engines started. The industrial reality behind American air superiority created an impossible situation for Japanese forces. Statistics painted a grim picture of the production war being fought in factories thousands of miles from combat zones. Grumman's manufacturing facilities had reached extraordinary output levels by late 1944. Assembly lines delivered 500 Hellcats every 30 days. Meanwhile, pilot training programs operated with assembly line efficiency. Fresh aviators emerged from flight schools faster than combat operations could consume them. Aircraft carriers deployed with spare fighters stored in their hangars. Damaged Hellcats received immediate attention from repair crews. Destroyed aircraft were replaced within hours. Japan faced the opposite reality. Their aircraft production struggled against mounting obstacles. Hero manufacturing peaked at 240 units monthly during 1944. But quality suffered as experienced factory workers were conscripted for military service. Raw materials became scarce. Fuel shortages crippled flight training programs. Pilot preparation time dropped catastrophically. Pre-war training required 700 flight hours before assignment to operational squadrons. By 1944, desperate shortages forced reductions to 200 hours. Many replacement pilots arrived at frontline units with less than 100 hours in their assigned aircraft type. The mathematics painted a hopeless picture. American pilots averaged 300 combat hours in Hellcats before completing their tours. Japanese aviators managed 30 hours on average before death claimed them. Experience gaps multiplied technological advantages exponentially. By early 1945, typical American fighter pilots possessed more flight time than Japanese flight instructors. Marine Hellcat squadrons demonstrated remarkable versatility across different operational environments. VMF 218, known as the Hellhawks, operated from Majuro Atoll and pioneered ground attack techniques. Their experiments revealed the aircraft's robust construction could handle substantial weapon loads. The Hellcat carried 2,000 pounds of bombs or 6 5-inch rockets while maintaining its air superiority capabilities. Darkness no longer provided sanctuary for Japanese aircraft after late 1944. The F6F-3 night fighter variant extended American dominance through every hour of the day. These specialized aircraft carried radar equipment and trained night fighter crews. VMF N-76 and VMF N-77 developed hunting tactics that made nighttime operations as perilous for Japanese aircraft as daylight sorties. February 1945 marked the virtual end of Japanese naval aviation as an effective fighting force. The once mighty Zero squadrons that had terrorized Allied forces in 1942 existed only as scattered remnants. Individual aircraft might appear sporadically, but coordinated operations had ceased. The Hellcat had achieved more than air superiority. Complete air supremacy now characterized the Pacific theater. American aircraft operated without meaningful opposition over vast areas of Japanese-controlled territory. The transformation was absolute. 3 years earlier, Japanese fighters had ruled Pacific skies with seemingly invincible confidence. Now their survivors hid on remote airfields, emerging only for desperate kamikaze missions. The Battle of Okinawa began April 1, 1945, and provided the Hellcat's final demonstration of total aerial dominance. Japanese military planners, desperate to halt American advances, launched Operation 10-Go. This massive effort committed every available aircraft to kamikaze attacks against the invasion fleet. Japanese high command believed suicide tactics might succeed where conventional fighter combat had failed completely. Their calculations proved tragically wrong. The Hellcat demonstrated equal effectiveness against kamikaze aircraft as it had shown against traditional fighters. Desperation could not overcome technological and tactical superiority. Combat air patrol procedures, refined through 3 years of continuous combat, created defensive layers that kamikaze aircraft rarely penetrated. Vice Admiral Richmond Turner commanded amphibious forces at Okinawa and documented the defensive system's remarkable effectiveness. Fighter director officers maintained constant radar surveillance across hundreds of miles of ocean and sky. Hellcat combat air patrols stationed themselves at 30,000, 20,000, and 10,000 feet altitude. Every inbound raid faced interception at minimum 50 miles from the fleet. Coordination between radar operators, fighter direction centers, and patrol aircraft achieved 90% interception rates. April 6th brought the largest kamikaze attack of the entire war. 355 Japanese aircraft launched simultaneously in a desperate bid to overwhelm American defenses. The assault demonstrated the defensive system's devastating effectiveness against mass attacks. Fighting squadrons from 10 different carriers intercepted the incoming waves in coordinated attacks. VF-9, flying from USS Yorktown, splashed 21 kamikaze before they reached the picket destroyers. VF-17 from USS Hornet destroyed 18 more. VF-30 from USS Belleau Wood accounted for 15 additional kills. Lieutenant Howard Finn flew combat air patrol that morning and later described the clinical efficiency with which American fighters dismantled the massive raid. Radar vectored our division toward a huge formation at odd 9:23 hours. We spotted them from 20 miles distance. The formation looked like an enormous swarm of angry bees approaching our fleet. But we knew exactly what to do. Our dive carried us through their loose formation at maximum speed. Each pilot selected individual targets from the mass of aircraft. The kamikaze flew straight and level courses with no defensive maneuvering whatsoever. It resembled target practice at gunnery school more than aerial combat. I destroyed 4 aircraft in a single firing pass. My wingmen accounted for 3 more between them. The entire engagement lasted perhaps 5 minutes from initial contact to final splash. Of 355 Japanese aircraft that launched that morning, only 22 managed to reach the fleet anchorage. Hellcat defensive screens had destroyed over 90% before they posed any meaningful threat to American ships. The mathematics were staggering and demoralizing for surviving Japanese aircrew. This performance repeated throughout the entire Okinawa campaign. Thousands of kamikaze aircraft launched against American forces. The vast majority fell to Hellcat combat air patrols long before reaching their intended targets. Japanese sources, documented through post-war strategic bombing survey interviews, revealed the growing despair among kamikaze pilots. These airmen, often barely trained teenagers with 50 hours total flight time, faced Hellcat pilots with hundreds of combat hours and dozens of confirmed victories. The outcome was predetermined before engines started. Experience gaps made survival impossible for Japanese pilots. Ensign Hachiro Miyashita survived his kamikaze mission only because his engine failed during final approach. He ditched his aircraft and became a prisoner of war. His testimony provided haunting insight into the psychological state of kamikaze pilots. Our commanders told us American fighters would be too busy defending multiple targets to stop every attacker. They promised our overwhelming numbers would break through their defensive screens. These assurances proved to be complete lies. The Hellcats appeared everywhere, at every altitude. They shot down my squadron mates like they were stationary training targets rather than desperate human beings. Each pilot died alone, surrounded by American fighters that seemed to materialize from empty sky. I felt almost grateful when my engine failed and forced me to ditch. Better to face capture than those terrible guns that reached out across miles of sky with perfect accuracy. Hellcat tactical evolution continued even during the war's final months. Squadron commanders developed what they termed the grinder system. This rotating combat air patrol maintained fresh divisions at each altitude level. Tired or low-fuel aircraft were relieved every 30 minutes by alert, fully armed fighters. The system maintained constant coverage with maximum effectiveness. No Japanese raid could time attacks to catch depleted or fatigued patrols. Fresh pilots with full ammunition loads always stood ready to intercept incoming threats. The defensive screen never weakened regardless of attack timing or duration. F6F variants delivered improved performance that provided additional tactical advantages over increasingly obsolete Japanese aircraft. The massive R2800 engine produced 2,200 horsepower and delivered maximum speeds of 390 miles per hour. Climb rates reached 3,700 feet per minute under combat power settings. Japanese aircraft, increasingly obsolete and poorly maintained, could not match these performance numbers. Many enemy fighters showed visible signs of material shortages and declining manufacturing quality. Paint schemes appeared hastily applied. Engine performance seemed inconsistent. Control surfaces sometimes showed poor fit and finish. By May 1945, Japanese air attacks on Okinawa had virtually ceased. The Hellcat defensive screen had systematically destroyed over 3,000 enemy aircraft during the campaign. American fighter losses to enemy action totaled 78 aircraft. The kill ratio had actually improved to 38-1, demonstrating increasing American tactical superiority. Marine Corps aviation documentation showed similar dominance from captured land bases. VMF 323, known as the Death Rattlers, operated from Kadena Airfield and achieved 124 aerial victories during April alone. Their Hellcats flew from former Japanese runways while providing close air support and maintaining air superiority simultaneously. This dual capability represented the ultimate demonstration of the aircraft's remarkable versatility. The same fighters that destroyed enemy aircraft in aerial combat could deliver precision ground attacks against fortified positions. No previous naval fighter had demonstrated such operational flexibility under combat conditions. The ground attack role evolved significantly as the war progressed. Hellcats delivered napalm, rockets, and bombs with precision that earlier fighters could never achieve. The robust airframe absorbed ground fire that would have destroyed lighter aircraft designs. Battle damage that proved fatal to other fighters merely inconvenienced Hellcat pilots. Combat reports described aircraft returning to base with multiple cylinder hits, damaged control surfaces, and failed hydraulic systems. Pilots regularly flew successful missions despite battle damage that would have forced emergency landings in other aircraft types. The rugged construction saved countless lives while maintaining operational effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel John Dobbin commanded MAG-31 and wrote comprehensive operational summaries that praised Hellcat capabilities across all mission types. The F6F has proven itself the ideal Pacific theater fighter aircraft. Air superiority missions, ground attack sorties, reconnaissance flights, it excels in every assigned role without compromise. Maintenance crews appreciate its simple, rugged construction that enables repairs under primitive field conditions. Pilots trust the aircraft completely because it consistently brings them home despite severe battle damage. The Hellcat has fundamentally changed our understanding of carrier aviation capabilities and limitations. Final tabulation of Hellcat performance, compiled by Navy Department analysts in June 1945, revealed statistics that would define naval aviation effectiveness for future generations. The numbers told an extraordinary story of technological and tactical success. Total sorties flown exceeded 66,000 missions across all theaters of operation. Confirmed aerial victories reached 5,156 enemy aircraft destroyed in combat. Aircraft losses to enemy fighters totaled just 270 Hellcats. The overall kill ratio stood at 19.1 to 1, representing unprecedented effectiveness in aerial warfare. These statistics represented far more than tactical victories in individual engagements. They demonstrated the decisive advantage gained through combining sound engineering principles, massive industrial capacity, and effective tactical doctrine. The Hellcat had achieved what seemed impossible in 1942: complete negation of Japanese air power across the Pacific. Strategic implications of Hellcat dominance extended far beyond individual battle outcomes. Joint Chiefs of Staff documents from spring 1945 revealed how air superiority influenced invasion planning for Operation Downfall, the proposed assault on Japan's home islands. The complete domination achieved by American fighters changed fundamental assumptions about amphibious warfare. General Douglas MacArthur's planning staff, according to recently declassified documents, calculated that Hellcat air supremacy would enable unprecedented close air support for invasion forces. Intelligence estimates projected Japanese kamikaze reserves of 5,000 aircraft positioned for homeland defense. However, planners expressed complete confidence that Hellcat combat air patrols could maintain the 90% interception rate achieved at Okinawa. Admiral Chester Nimitz provided strategic assessment in a document dated May 15, 1945, that captured the transformation in naval warfare capabilities. The F6F Hellcat has fundamentally altered the entire naval warfare equation in our favor. We now possess air superiority so complete and overwhelming that Japanese air power cannot effectively contest our operations anywhere in the Pacific theater. This transformation changes invasion calculations substantially and reduces projected casualties significantly. Ground forces can expect continuous air cover and interdiction support that was previously impossible to guarantee. The psychological impact on enemy forces cannot be overstated. Japanese leadership clearly understood their air defenses had failed completely. Intercepted diplomatic cables, decoded through Operation Magic, revealed growing desperation within Japanese strategic planning circles. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo admitted in a June 1945 cable to Ambassador Naotaki Sato that American fighter superiority had made Japanese airspace essentially indefensible. Their Grumman fighters destroy our remaining aircraft with complete impunity. Our pilots cannot compete against their superior technology, training, and numerical advantage. The situation has become hopeless from an aviation perspective. British naval observers attached to Task Force 58 documented Hellcat impact in detailed reports to the Admiralty. Captain Michael Bell, serving aboard USS Wasp, wrote observations that would influence Royal Navy fighter development for years to come. The Americans have achieved what we considered impossible just 3 years ago: complete negation of enemy air power through overwhelming technological and tactical superiority. The F6F Hellcat represents a fundamental revolution in naval warfare that we must study carefully for our own Pacific operations. The industrial accomplishment behind Hellcat production deserved equal recognition alongside combat achievements. Grumman's Long Island manufacturing facilities, according to preserved company records, produced 12,075 Hellcats between June 1942 and November 1945. Peak monthly production reached 605 aircraft in March 1945, representing extraordinary manufacturing efficiency. This industrial achievement, combined with pilot training programs that produced skilled aviators faster than combat attrition could consume them, created sustainable air superiority. Japanese industrial capacity, by contrast, collapsed progressively under strategic bombing and naval blockade pressure. Zero production, which had peaked at 240 aircraft monthly in 1944, fell to fewer than 100 per month by mid-1945. Quality control deteriorated dramatically as material shortages worsened. Captured aircraft examination revealed substandard materials, poor workmanship, and inadequate engine performance across all Japanese aircraft types. The industrial war paralleled the aerial war in every respect. American production capability and quality control overwhelmed declining Japanese manufacturing capacity. Superior resources, combined with advanced manufacturing techniques, created insurmountable advantages that grew larger each month. Technical intelligence teams examined captured Japanese aircraft and documented the widening technological gap between opposing forces. An A6M-0, captured intact at Saipan, underwent comprehensive testing at Naval Air Station Anacostia. The evaluation report, dated August 1944, provided devastating analysis of Japanese fighter capabilities. Subject aircraft demonstrates excellent maneuverability characteristics, but catastrophic vulnerabilities in modern combat environments. Complete lack of armor protection, non-self-sealing fuel tanks, and lightweight construction make it extremely vulnerable to .50 caliber machine gun fire. A single burst from Hellcat weapons would prove instantly fatal. The report continued with stark conclusions that highlighted Japanese tactical obsolescence. The A6M-0's design philosophy of maximizing performance through minimal weight made perfect sense in 1940. In 1944, facing heavily armed and armored fighters like the F6F, such design approaches proved suicidal. The Japanese possessed no effective counter to American firepower and protection advantages. Pilot training documentation illustrated another decisive advantage that grew more pronounced as the war continued. By 1945, American naval aviators received over 300 hours of comprehensive flight training before assignment to fleet squadrons. This preparation included extensive gunnery practice, advanced tactical training, and multiple carrier qualification attempts. Japanese pilots, due to critical fuel shortages and massive instructor losses, received as little as 100 hours total flight time before combat assignments. Many arrived at operational units having never fired their weapons in training. The experience gap had become completely unbridgeable, through any tactical innovation. Veterans like McCampbell, with hundreds of combat hours and dozens of confirmed victories, led squadrons against Japanese pilots who had never engaged enemy aircraft. The mathematical outcome was inevitable and tragic. Experienced, well-trained American pilots flying superior aircraft could not be defeated by undertrained Japanese pilots in obsolete fighters. Medical records from fleet hospital ships documented the different nature of casualties between opposing air forces. American fighter pilot losses resulted primarily from anti-aircraft fire, operational accidents, or kamikaze attacks. Enemy fighters rarely caused American pilot casualties by 1945. Japanese pilot casualties, according to captured medical records and post-war interviews, showed the opposite pattern completely. Most died in aerial combat, specifically from .50 caliber machine gun fire. This disparity reflected the complete reversal in air combat effectiveness since 1942. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan demonstrated another crucial Hellcat capability: long-range escort duty. When B-29 superfortresses began flying from Iwo Jima to attack Japanese cities, Hellcat escorts from nearby aircraft carriers provided fighter protection for the massive bombers. The combination proved devastatingly effective against remaining Japanese air defenses. Enemy interceptors attempting to attack the bomber formations were systematically destroyed by Hellcat escorts, allowing bombing missions to proceed without meaningful opposition. The escort role extended Hellcat influence far beyond traditional naval operations. Lieutenant William Hardy flew escort missions in May 1945 and recorded detailed observations of the changed tactical environment. Our primary job involved keeping Japanese fighters away from the B-29 formations. We patrolled above and ahead of the bomber stream at predetermined altitudes. Any enemy fighters that appeared received immediate attention from diving Hellcats. Most escort missions proceeded without seeing any Japanese aircraft whatsoever. Enemy pilots had learned to avoid areas where Hellcats operated routinely. The few interceptors that did appear were destroyed quickly and efficiently. The bombers continued to their targets unmolested. By July 1945, American air superiority over Japan itself had become absolutely complete. Hellcats flew reconnaissance missions over Tokyo Bay, photographing potential invasion beaches for Operation Downfall planning. No Japanese fighters challenged these missions despite their proximity to major population centers. The once proud Japanese Naval Aviation Force had been reduced to preserving a few remaining aircraft for final kamikaze attacks. Everyone understood these final missions would be largely destroyed by Hellcat combat air patrols before reaching their intended targets. The psychological impact was devastating for surviving Japanese air crews. August 15, 1945, brought the day Japan announced unconditional surrender. Hellcat squadrons received stand-down orders while maintaining combat air patrol stations over the Pacific. For pilots who had fought continuously from the Philippine Sea to Okinawa, the sudden silence felt completely surreal. No more radar vectors directing them toward incoming enemy raids. No more boom and zoom attacks on helpless Japanese formations. No more burning zeros spiraling downward into Pacific waters. The transformation from constant combat to peaceful silence happened in a single radio transmission. Lieutenant Robert Murray flew combat air patrol from USS Shangri-La and recorded the historic moment in his personal flight log. We were orbiting at 25,000 feet when the radio crackled with an unprecedented message. All stations, hostilities have ceased effective immediately. Cease all offensive operations. I looked across at my wingman through my canopy. He stared back at me with the same expression of disbelief. 3 years of continuous warfare had ended with a simple radio call. We flew back to the carrier in complete formation silence. Nobody said a word during the entire approach and landing. The Hellcat had completed its assigned mission with unprecedented effectiveness. Final accounting of F6F Hellcat achievements, compiled by Navy Department aviation historians, revealed statistics that would define the aircraft's legendary status for decades to come. The numbers represented more than tactical success in individual engagements. Total F6F Hellcats produced reached 12,275 aircraft across all variants. Combat sorties flown totaled 66,530 missions in all theaters. Confirmed aerial victories reached 5,223 enemy aircraft destroyed, representing 56% of all U.S. Navy aerial victories throughout the war. Aircraft losses in combat included 270 Hellcats lost to enemy aircraft and 553 lost to all causes combined. The overall kill ratio stood at 19.1 to 1, representing unprecedented effectiveness in fighter combat. Pilots who achieved ace status while flying Hellcats numbered 307 individuals. These statistics demonstrated more than tactical superiority. They proved the decisive advantage gained through combining sound engineering principles, massive industrial capacity, effective tactical doctrine, and superior pilot training. The Hellcat had achieved complete negation of enemy air power across the entire Pacific theater. The human dimension emerged clearly in post-war reunions and historical research projects. Japanese naval aviation veterans, interviewed decades after the war's end, spoke of the Hellcat with complex mixtures of professional respect and remembered terror. The aircraft had fundamentally altered their understanding of aerial warfare. Captain Minoru Genda, who had planned the Pearl Harbor attack, provided frank assessment in a 1982 interview that captured Japanese perspective on American air superiority. The Hellcat defeated our naval aviation as decisively as the atomic bombs defeated our home islands. Our pilots, our tactics, our entire air strategy became completely obsolete when that aircraft appeared in significant numbers. We could not adapt quickly enough to survive the transformation. American veterans gathering at annual tailhook reunions shared completely different perspectives on their wartime experience. To these men, the Hellcat represented salvation incarnate, an aircraft tough enough to bring them home, powerful enough to defeat any opponent, reliable enough to trust completely with their lives. Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's leading ace with 34 confirmed victories, achieved entirely in Hellcats, reflected on the aircraft's significance in his 1996 autobiography. The F6F represented the ultimate fighter pilot's fighter aircraft. It performed every mission requirement well without significant compromises. Adequate climb rate, excellent dive performance, acceptable turning ability, outstanding damage absorption, and devastating firepower delivery. More importantly, the Hellcat was forgiving of pilot errors. It brought inexperienced pilots home when they made tactical mistakes that would have proven fatal in other aircraft types. Flying a Hellcat gave every pilot confidence because you understood you possessed decisive advantages before any engagement began. The technological legacy influenced American fighter design for decades following the war's conclusion. Post-war analysis by naval aviation engineers identified key innovations that became standard practice, prioritizing pilot protection over maximum performance, designing for maintainability under primitive field conditions, integrating massive firepower with adequate ammunition capacity, and ensuring reliability through robust construction methods. These fundamental principles shaped all subsequent naval fighters, including the F8F Bearcat, F9F Panther, and eventually the jet-powered fighters of the Korean War era and beyond. The basic philosophy that had defeated the Zero, building fighters capable of absorbing punishment while delivering overwhelming firepower, remained central to American fighter design throughout the Cold War period. Military historians identified the Hellcat development program as exemplifying successful weapons development methodology. Clearly defined operational requirements based on thorough combat analysis, sound engineering practices prioritizing effectiveness over technical sophistication, industrial capacity enabling true mass production, and tactical doctrine specifically optimized to maximize weapon system strengths while minimizing weaknesses. General Curtis LeMay, who had commanded strategic bombing operations, wrote in his memoirs about broader lessons learned from the Hellcat program. The Hellcat development and deployment program demonstrated exactly how America wins major wars. We systematically analyzed the tactical problem, engineered an effective solution, produced it in overwhelming numbers, and employed it with tactics specifically designed to maximize its inherent advantages. Once we perfected this formula, the Japanese never had any realistic chance of victory. International aviation historians universally recognize the F6F as ranking among history's most successful fighter aircraft designs. British aviation historian Alfred Price noted the Hellcat's unique combination of effectiveness and operational practicality. The Hellcat achieved the highest victory-to-loss ratio of any fighter aircraft in World War II, while operating under the most demanding conditions imaginable. More significantly, it accomplished this remarkable record while operating exclusively from aircraft carriers, surely the most challenging operational environment possible for fighter aircraft. The few remaining airworthy F6F Hellcats, carefully preserved by aviation museums and private collectors, serve as flying monuments to the men who flew them and the war they helped win decisively. At modern air shows, the distinctive sound of the R-2800 engine and the sight of that stubby, powerful fighter still evoke powerful memories of a war fought across Pacific skies between 1942 and 1945. The National Naval Aviation Museum at Pensacola displays a beautifully restored Hellcat painted in the markings of VF-15, McCampbell's legendary squadron. The accompanying placard provides fitting tribute to the aircraft's unprecedented effectiveness. This aircraft type destroyed more enemy aircraft than any other Allied fighter throughout World War II. It achieved this remarkable record while operating exclusively from the pitching decks of aircraft carriers, demonstrating conclusively that American industrial and technical capability could overcome any adversary through superior engineering and tactics. Today, military aviation students continue studying Hellcat tactics as classic examples of sound operational art. The fundamental principles remain relevant to modern air combat. Identifying enemy weaknesses systematically, developing platforms and tactics specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses, and executing operations with disciplined coordination and overwhelming force concentration. The boom and zoom tactics, the layered combat air patrol system, and the integration of radar with fighter direction centers all remained influential in modern air combat doctrine. These innovations, perfected during World War II, continue influencing fighter tactics in the jet age and beyond. The final testament to Hellcat impact came from an unexpected source that demonstrated the aircraft's lasting influence on former enemies. In 1991, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force invited American veterans to Japan for 50th anniversary Pearl Harbor commemorations. During the ceremonies, Japanese naval aviation veterans presented a memorial plaque honoring the aircraft that had taught them harsh lessons about modern warfare. The inscription, written in both Japanese and English, provided moving tribute to the Hellcat and its pilots. To the Grumman F6F Hellcat and the brave men who flew it with such skill and determination. Your aircraft demonstrated that modern warfare demands far more than traditional warrior spirit alone. Victory requires industrial might, technological innovation, and tactical wisdom applied with overwhelming force. You taught us these essential lessons at terrible cost to both our nations. We honor your remarkable achievement while mourning all who died during that painful learning process. May future generations remember these lessons and choose peaceful solutions to international disputes. The Hellcat story represents far more than aviation history or technological development. It demonstrates how nations at war must adapt, innovate, and ultimately prevail through combining industrial capacity, technological excellence, and human courage with sound strategic thinking. The complete transformation from June 1942, when the Zero dominated Pacific skies with apparent invincibility, to August 1945, when Hellcats ruled them with absolute authority, illustrates the decisive power of effective weapons systems matched with superior tactics and overwhelming production capacity. The streams of 50-caliber machine gun fire that reached across Pacific skies during those crucial years accomplished more than destroying Japanese aircraft. They systematically destroyed illusions about the fundamental nature of modern industrial warfare and technological competition between major powers. Japanese military forces that had prepared for combat based on pre-war assumptions about honor, spirit, and traditional warrior values found themselves facing an enemy who had scientifically analyzed their strengths, systematically engineered effective counters, and deployed those solutions with overwhelming industrial capacity and tactical effectiveness. The Hellcat saved thousands of American lives by achieving air superiority that made invasion and strategic bombing campaigns possible with acceptable casualty rates. Simultaneously, it inflicted thousands of Japanese deaths through systematic destruction of their remaining air forces and the pilots who flew them. This fundamental duality, representing salvation for American forces while bringing catastrophe to Japanese aviation, defines the aircraft's complex historical legacy. Military effectiveness and human tragedy intertwined throughout the Hellcat's combat record, reflecting the broader moral complexities of total warfare between industrial nations. The lessons learned during those desperate years continue influencing military thinking and weapons development decades later. The Hellcat demonstrated that technological superiority, properly applied through sound tactics and adequate numbers, could achieve decisive victory against determined opponents regardless of their courage, skill, or fighting spirit.